And we're back. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox, here with my buddy Tim Tate, my coffee supplier. He's the guy that keeps the smile on my face. What's up, Elisabetta? It's funny. We were just talking about, Elisabetta, maybe you can share and shed some light on this. We were talking about Italian establishments in New York City who have access to some of the most amazing coffee in the world, but they use Illy and Lavazza, like pre-ground. Why? You have to, I'm sure it's nostalgia or something. I don't know. Elisabetta, we would love to hear from you. So
I could get in trouble for this conversation, probably.
It's all right. We can take him out. I choked him out. And Elisabetta, she got my back. We trained jiu-jitsu together. She's wicked. She's dangerous. So we were talking about how we met, but also like your beginning, your pursuit of your own endeavors and dreams, the entrepreneurial dream. You wrote a business plan for something involved in wine and spirits, not having a spirits background, ballsy.
Right.
You go to a dude with a really like dope place and training program, and you offer your services, not for free, but you're like, you know, I'll start at the bottom. I'll make coffee. You teach me the bar. I'll be a bar back. I'll work hard, which is that's old school. That's like apprentice style. And that's a great way to do it for those of you out there listening who are like, I don't know how to get started. Like, start small. Don't be like, I love these guys that are like, I'm going to make $1 million by the end of the year. And I'm like, what are you doing right now? And they're like, I'm looking for work. I host a podcast. Like, yeah, okay. Start reasonably, start small. Don't be greedy and know that there's a process. And so you adopted that. Your original business plan didn't work out. You needed funding. You need money. A little bit. Not always. Startups don't need money.
Startups only need like $300 million or something like that
anymore. Some of them they're just like, I have a great idea, and it's like you don't pay rent. You don't look. What do you do?
I guess it really depends what kind of startup you're talking.
But. We'll talk about startups in a little bit. I want to talk about Adam's thing. Deliver Zero.
Yeah.
Trying to get him on. He's shy. Anyway, so
I'm kind of shy too. You got me on.
You're not shy. You're a performer.
Oh, like sometimes if people are performers, like don't think that they're not shy.
No, but they could turn it on.
Maybe
turn it on. So I would say, yeah, you're restrained, but I get sense in you. There's an inner tiger.
A very quiet tiger. Yeah, quiet. But tiger. Watch out.
Right, exactly. He's gonna hug you to death. We the hug gangsters. So your next move was a coffee roaster. You were in a shared space, a wood shop, precisely, roasting coffee, packaging elsewhere, all off-site. You lost those 2 spots, and then you working in another project that was more or less like freelance technical support for
some major coffee companies around town.
Like Intelligentsia was one of your biggest.
Yeah, Intelli was one of our biggest. We also did a lot of work for Illy Cafe, and a lot of the major roasters around New York.
And Intelligentsia was really like one of the first. They kind of led the way in terms of the direct trade, working with farmers, coffee farmers, and attempting to raise the quality of life and not going through the usual channels of supply. And just delivering like a really, really awesome product starting in like the 90s, right?
Yep, definitely. They were one of the like forefronts of that change in coffee. Like the direct trade movement was definitely, they were one of the first companies. Stumptown is one of the first companies as well, right around the same time frame.
I know, but Intelligentsia also had a really big emphasis on training people making the coffee to represent it too. So it was like the thing was survivable. It's like, we're doing this on this side, but like we need you as our soldiers to represent it the right way, because if it tastes bad, nobody cares. Nobody's going to buy a bad product just because it's like good for the world. So they attacked it on both fronts. And for me, like I'd always been into coffee. I grew up working in restaurants. So it was always a component. I was trying to think back to like the first real machine I worked on, and you get a kick out of this. This was like late 90s when I was living in Rochester it was an Italian place. It was great. It was in an old Victorian home essentially. And this guy, like the ground floor was the restaurant and he lived upstairs, and he was from Naples and just total like egomaniac. But this thing looked like the starship landed in the kitchen. You know, it was like one of those super duper fully automatic machines from the 90s, but it never, like all the components didn't work
all the time.
So it was just like they get it fixed and it would break. So like the milk frother, you were supposed to just
super automatic machines are known for that.
So I learned to be resilient and like negotiate. I mean, the thing was huge, you know, it looked like the first computer, you know, and like all these buttons and stuff. But like at the end of the day, you just had to work yourself and like pull your own shot and froth your own milk. So I learned to be resourceful as far as coffee goes. But then when I was like, okay, I really want a good machine at home. One, because coffee was getting very expensive, you know, and I was just like, it doesn't make sense to give all this money away. But I just drink a lot of it and I just want it right there. And just like with everything, I want to learn what's going on behind it. So when I got my first Rancilio Silva, what is it?
Sylvia,
yeah. The guy I was watching like YouTube clips of at the time and everything was only using Intelligentsia coffee. And he was like, this is the stuff, you know, and this was like around 2000, 2001. And that was my first like introduction to them. So I kind of chased it. I got the machine and everything. And then like, boom, right after that, Ramin used to work at the Tea Lounge with my buddy, Kirk Shaneher. He's a guitar player that I worked with a lot. Kirk was working at the 7th Ave and 10th Street, the original Tea Lounge location.
Josh, what's Josh's last name?
I can't remember, but from Southside, right?
Yeah.
So they were all like, I was playing with Kirk at the time, and he's like, you got to meet this guy Ramin. So I meet him, and then Ramin walks into the wine store, and I'm like, oh, whoa. And he's like, oh, I live right here. So this is all like Windsor Terrace, super small towny Brooklyn vibe going on here. And then Josh and Ramin opened Southside on 6th and 20th, 19th, whatever. And I used to hang out there a lot. And Ramin was like, oh yeah, I used the Sylvia to like test all my products and figure stuff out. And like at that point, he really like took over the Intelligentsia lab in Soho or whatever.
Yeah, Ramin's great.
Yeah. And then Josh worked with Steeplechase. Oh, I happen to have a Steeplechase shirt on. And I know Lynn and Keith pretty well. And when they were first, like, I don't think they were open yet. And I was like coming around, and Josh was there, and we like kind of reconnected. It was funny because he was showing them some stuff, and I was just there. We were talking and everything. And I said something about triple ristrettos, and they were like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Shh, just don't bother yourself with that. Don't listen to that guy. He's not right." So that was kind of like how I got started in coffee, and then connecting with Ramin. And then that relationship blossomed. We just, even once he moved to Bay Ridge, we like stayed in contact. And I just like always had this fantasy of opening a coffee shop using Intelligentsia, because so it was great when we finally did. And I got the big monster Rancilio, which was not my favorite machine, but it was very reasonably priced.
Right.
And he got me a great deal. And
I mean, you can spend 30 grand on an espresso machine if you want.
Well, now I fantasize about those, the Arduinos, it's got the scale in the, in the thing, and you can
very advanced.
You can time the angel share so it cuts the pump.
Yeah, you can just decide exactly how you want your shot to be, and it will in real time, make adjustments.
Those things are amazing. And those grinders too, they have like the heated chamber. And like, I'm just like, oh my God. But yeah, what's that investment? Just for the grinder and the machine.
Grinders are like $4,000. Those kind of grinders are about 4,000 or so.
I thought they were more than that.
I mean, there's drip coffee machines now that are like over $6,000 too.
But that Arduino grinder that like heats the
burrs,
burrs.
I think that's like a $4,000 price point on that.
More than that.
Yeah, we have one and for our events.
And those, right, you got that white one. Yeah, it's like really dope. And then the like a two group or 3-group machine like that is like,
we use Sinessa's for our.
Those aren't cheap either, but those are
they're like 16 or so.
Yeah. So you're talking about like solid 20 grand just for 2
pieces of equipment.
Yeah. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's what your business if you're depending on coffee for the majority of your business, like, that's not that much money. If you think in the scheme of things, I would say, if for a guy like me, it's a lot of money. But in traditional investing in like a business,
sure, of course,
for the meat and potatoes of it, that's not much.
No, I spent quadruple that for Della. So
right, yeah.
But just like buying machines myself, I'm just like, wow, that's way.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to stomach if you're.
But it does come down to the consistency too. Like I was talking about, like how intelligent you put so much into it, like the equipment too.
I mean, espresso, it's a finicky product. It's alive. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that you just put the coffee in the machine and it's going to be the same every
changes
time.
On the hour
good,
sometimes, right?
Yeah, you need a very detail-oriented person and somebody who understands flavor and how to make adjustments and is willing to check back in on the product over and over again, and make a change every time they need to. Not necessarily just time-based, but just a person who understands food and drink and balance. Like balance is the most important thing to coffee to me.
But cocktails are the same.
Cocktails exactly the same. So there's a lot of parallels there.
Like you, I started more. I was doing more coffee, and definitely like working on kitchens, but also service as well. Like working as a waiter, and when I bumped up to bartending, I just literally was like, it's just like a coffee drink. It's different ingredients, and it applied really well. Yeah. And same thing, someone just gave me a chance. I remember this guy I was making coffee at this restaurant in Tribeca, and he was like, you'd be a really good bartender. And I was like, yeah. Like, why don't you give me a try? And then like one day the bartender didn't show up for lunch and people were ordering like martinis and shit. And I was just like, everybody's like, what are you going to do? I was like, I got this. Yeah. And it was fun.
And you have like sweetness,
I was a bartender.
Body,
it's the same.
Acidity, strength.
I love the coffee. The cuppings,
those are all the same.
I love the cuppings because it's like wine notes. They're like, oh, notes of apricot, and it's like
I mean, I got something called a Q grader certification, and that's what it's all about, and like what that.
So you're like the coffee sommelier.
It's similar, like the reason that was developed is it's by the Coffee Quality Institute, CQI, and what they are for, they're a nonprofit that tries to raise the quality of green coffee. And so basically, like if a farm in South America or wherever decides that, hey, we're not producing the kind of coffee that we need to be able to make the kind of wages that we need to for our farmers, then we can send our coffee to CQI. CQI is going to send out that coffee to 4 Q graders, and then we're going to roast and cup that coffee, and we're going to assign it a grade, and we're going to tell this farm what kind of defects that coffee has, what kind of score that's going to get, which means what kind of price they're going to get paid. And then, based on that feedback, we can also send a representative to that farm and give advice on how they can change their farming practices in order to help raise the wages that they can raise from their coffee. So it's a pretty important thing, it's kind of ridiculous to hear someone talking about like all of these minute grapefruit, plum,
tangerine pith.
Yeah, like this is how people talk about coffee when they're cupping it, and to a lot of people that's just like ridiculous, but it does come from a great important place.
No, your job is so much more serious than I really thought.
It's just coffee too at the same time. Yeah.
Well, let's take one more quick break because I want to elaborate on what you got going on now, like some of the initiatives, and that was one of them, and really great insight. That's awesome, and we'll talk more in depth about that. So we're gonna take one more last break. We'll be back in just a few. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web.